child immediately from the mother's body and to put it into the arms of the parent. They've run tests on this for a number of years, and they take children, and before the baby is even cleaned up after birth, they'll put the child in the mother's arms and let the mother love it. And they're finding that the children that are given that opportunity of love develop stability in their personality that children do not have who are taken just out of the mother's body and placed in the cold, sterile environment of a hospital nursery. There's a lot of difference in what happens in the development of that child. We actually deal a lot of times with spirits of rejection that entered in that hospital experience when the children were not able to receive the parental love and fondling and touching and cuddling that they needed from the moment of their birth. That's interesting, isn't it? All right, God is showing us. He's showing us how rejection, He's showing each one of us here today how rejection may have had an opportunity to enter us. Now, a couple of other spirits on that finger are also rejection-type spirits. One is fear of rejection. Now, that's just exactly what it sounds like. One who fears rejection is one who said, well, they don't love me, and I'm sure when they really get to know me, they're not going to like me at all. Afraid that you won't be accepted by others. Afraid that you won't be appreciated and loved by other people. Fear of rejection. The Lord has shown us that fear of rejection is the root behind paranoia. Paranoia is basically distrust and suspicion of other people. And a person who has a fear that he won't be loved, he puts a shield up. And he says, now, I don't want these people to get too close to me, and I've got to look at them, and I've got to analyze their facial expressions. I've got to analyze what they say because I don't want to get hurt. So the fear of being rejected behind that suspicion and distrust opens for the problem that is referred to as paranoia. Now, the other spirit on that is self-rejection. Now, rejecting oneself is wounding oneself. We usually wouldn't think about hurting ourselves. But one of the strongest things of hurt that you can do towards yourself is to hate yourself and not love yourself. There is a place for self-recognition of who we are in the Lord. You know, God creates things, and He creates all things good. Sometimes you look in the mirror and you wonder if God created you good. You look at the shape of your face, or you look at the hairline, or you look at something else, and you say, well, I don't like what I see in there. We must not reject ourselves, because when you reject yourself, you're saying, I do not accept myself like I am, which immediately opens the door for you to be something other than who you are. God doesn't want us to be like somebody else. He doesn't want us to be somebody else. He wants us to be just like who we are, like He created us to be, each one individually, as God put His stamp upon us and said, this is the way I made you. If we refuse to accept ourselves, some people do not accept themselves if they're created female, and they said, well, people would love me more. My daddy would love me if I were a boy rather than a girl, so I must reject the concept that I'm a girl, and I must be like a boy. And so this makes a person, a girl, it makes her masculine. It makes her a tomboy. And to find acceptance with her father, she goes out and climbs trees and learns how to throw a baseball and all of those things. That's taking her out of herself as the female that God created her. Now, the opposite is true in the boy, who feels that he will be more accepted and more approved and more loved if he happens to be feminine rather than masculine. And it causes him to be a sissy and so on, and other problems evolve out of that. We must accept ourselves as who we are, as God has created us. Now, that's the root problem. I come back to say that everything else in the disturbance of the personality strings out of the root of rejection. Now, look at the little finger on that same hand, and you find the spirit of inferiority and insecurity. The person who does not feel loved begins to feel insecure. If a little child is not properly loved as God teaches us to love little children, they will soon develop evidences in their actions of that rejection and of that insecurity that results from it. You see what Satan does. The things in a series that he sets together are like links in a chain. When the devil gets in a spirit into a person of rejection, then it's easy to put another link in the chain of insecurity. So what we see is that he links one spirit to another, like a long chain. And a chain is what the devil uses to put us in captivity, to put us into bonds. And the more links that he can get in the chain, the longer the chain is, and the greater and stronger is the resultant bondage that he gets a person into. But what many people have not yet recognized is that the devil links one thing into another. They're not just isolated pockets here, there, and yonder, but all of these spirits that indwell a person are linked, interwoven, connected one to another in a very logical, methodical way. Now, look at the next finger, and there you find the ring finger, which has on it the spirits of lust. You know, a lot of people, a lot of Spirit-filled Christians come to us and disclose, look, Brother Hammond, I've really got a problem with lust. I tell you, this thing is just eating me alive. And I said, but look, we've got to get to the root of the problem. Lust is what you see out here on the surface is your problem, but there's something else behind it. And that something else behind the lust problem is the rejection problem. See, lust is a counterfeit form of love. The devil always offers us the counterfeit. God offers us the love. Isn't it interesting that when God builds his kingdom, he builds it on a foundation of love. When the devil builds his kingdom, he builds it on a foundation of lust, the counterfeit of love. So here's a person who hasn't been loved. They're wounded. They're deficient. They're crying out, I've got to have love. And so as they begin to mature, the devil says, all right, I'll tell you how to get the love that you want. Go out here and have an experience. Go out here and get involved. Usually begins in the mind. Just think about it, what it would be like, fantasizing, lustful experiences. And so the person begins to entertain in their mind the lustful experiences. But the devil won't let it stop there. He wants to push it on till they've got into the overt act of sin, till they've committed fornication and adultery and masturbation. And then on pushing it into the perverseness of lust, into homosexuality and lesbianism and oral sex and on and on and on. He just wants to push it on as far as he possibly can. That's the devil's way of bringing in lust, through rejection, saying, you haven't been loved, here's the way to get love. Sometimes it's through other forms of lust, like material lust. A person may not have the sexual lust, but he may have a material lust problem, as trying to satisfy that love need. I haven't had the love that I wanted. What I'm going to substitute for that are things. If I can get enough beautiful clothes, if I can get enough fine automobiles, if I can get a fancy enough house or so forth. And so the desire, the lust to go beyond and to push and to drive to achieve these things is there. And so lust enters in. Now on the finger, that is the index finger, is the spirit of self-accusation. And I'll guarantee you by the time a person has fallen into lust or even into the fantasy of it, the condemnation begins to come in. And that's the finger you use to point with. And you point at self and say, you dirty, low-down, good-for-nothing so-and-so. Who do you think you are? And look what you've done. Do you think God would ever love you? Do you think God would ever really forgive you? Do you think God would ever use you in his kingdom? Self-accusation. Look at those fingers. That's the one you point with. The ruler spirit there stands up higher than the others, rejection. On the little finger is inferiority. You feel inferior, you feel little. On the ring finger that represents purity between husband and wife, there is the spirit of lust, the perversion of true love. So God had a beautiful thing. There's a lot of details in here that I don't have time to share with you this afternoon that are so precious and meaningful in understanding this revelation that God's given. And all down the left-hand side of that diagram, there are other spirits that are supportive of the ones that are up on the fingers. Those on the fingers were primary spirits in this woman's need, and down through the hand are other resultant spirits. And we'll just look at a few of those. Fear of judgment. In 1 John 4, it tells us there that perfect love casts out all fear. And a person who has a fear of God's judgment upon them are not perfected in love. When we are perfected in love, we do not have a fear of judgment. Self-pity. We heard about the pity party where we invite me, myself, and I, and we get off in the room and we just feel sorry for ourselves to the hilt. That's out of style. No more pity parties are allowed, folks. That's of the devil. We don't want the devil's party. We want God's, don't we? False compassion and responsibility. These spirits cause people to become involved with others' lives who are in deep problems, thinking they're going to help them out of compassion for them. Not being strong enough, they are drawn into that other person's problems. A lot of Christians fall into horrible pits of sin in an effort They say, because I love somebody, I'm going to help them, but God didn't tell them to help them, and they're trying to help somebody they are not equipped to help, and they fall into the pit with them. That's what false compassion and false responsibility do for a person. Now, the next are depression spirits and their companions, despondency and despair and so forth, right on down clear to suicide. You see, by the time a person begins to have demonic problems within himself, often the tendency is towards depression, discouragement, hopelessness. This is where the feeling comes in, well, my problems are unique. Do you ever feel like your problems are unique? Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. There's no use to explain it to you because you wouldn't understand it. Nobody has ever had a problem like mine. But we've already heard this week that all of these temptations are common to man. Your problem is not any different from somebody else's. The basic problem is just identical. I get so amused yet. People come up and they're going to share something that I've never heard before. And it's just like I'm listening to a tape that I've heard 1,000 times.